I've put together a PowerPoint presentation, and I think while Professor Naidu talked about diversity management from a research perspective, I'm looking at it mainly from an access to higher education, very specific to the South African context. So when we look at, I thought, just to give you a picture of the context itself, and within South Africa, we have 25 public universities and around 50 privates, and just over 1 million students at the public universities and about 70,000 at privates. What's interesting is that of the student population, we have about 60% who are female and 40% who are male. And this seems to be skewed towards more female students also graduating once their academic programs have been completed. We have traditional universities, universities of technology, and comprehensive universities. And the Department of Higher Education and Training actually sets the mandate in terms of the Higher Education Act 101 as amended. The Council on Higher Education oversees quality and accreditation of programs and advises the minister, and the South African Qualifications Authority registers all accredited programs according to the NQF. USAF, which I would also refer to in my future slides, is a forum of all public universities' vice-chancellors. In terms of the university types, comprehensive universities refer to those that offer the full spectrum of programs, including vocational, professional, and general, formative at both undergrad and postgrad levels. Traditional universities refer to institutions that offer a very broad range of general, formative, and professional programs at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. And then universities of technologies were previously called technicons, and they offer a range of programs that are more vocationally or professionally oriented, but primarily at the undergraduate level. So what is diversity within the South African higher education context? So according to UNESCO in 2009, diversity is reflected not only in racial, gender, and ethnic differences, but also in people's age, background, education, functioning, and personality. South Africa, as we all know, is racially and culturally very diverse, with historical imbalances and inequalities. Redress became necessary in 1994 with the change of government as we moved into democracy. And the main areas that were identified for redress included race, gender, and disability. The principle of equity requires fair opportunities to higher education programs and to succeed in them. So equity implies a critical identification of existing inequalities, which are the product of policies, structures, and practices based on racial, gender, disability, and other forms of discrimination or disadvantages, as cited by Mampeni in 2019. So within the South African context, we have, and I think this has been globally recognized, an extremely progressive and inclusive constitution. And the Bill of Rights within this constitution states, the state may not unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on one or more grounds, including race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth. And I think this very all-inclusive kind of definition of where we need to focus our attention on speaks very clearly of this inclusive and progressive constitution that the country enjoys. So what are some of the factors that impacts diversity management? I think primarily our historical imbalances, as has been clearly stated repeatedly, that South Africa happens to be one of the most unequal societies in the world. And the historical imbalances actually gave rise to this, to this inequity. And it is taking a very long time for us to reach any kind of balance in that. Institutional culture and institutional context are also two very important factors when it comes to how we manage diversity, because we have the location of an institution actually determines to a very large extent what range of diversity measures that institution will need to put in place. And then legislation and compliance with legislation also impacts on our management of diversity. We have a number of policies, laws, etc., that guide us in terms of how we manage this. And then we cannot ignore the macro environment that South Africa may have its own challenges within the country. However, global trends, the changes in technology, internationalization, etc., all are factors at a macro level that also dictate how we change what we do as we move forward. In terms of policies and legislation, there are various policies in place and which were necessary at the beginning of the democracy. Policies such as the Employment Equity Act, which was a means of ensuring that various organizations, employers, etc., were able to ensure that there was some level of access granted to people from all racial dimensions within the country. The broad-based Black economic empowerment, these were pieces of legislation that were meant to guide and direct. How successful they have been is a discussion for another day. What is, I think, very important is thoughtful implementation of all of these policies and pieces of legislation. So it should not just be legislation that dictates, but how one considers that within the contextual environment within which one operates. Training and development is available. However, more of this is needed, and it's an ongoing piece of work that needs to be done by any employer, simply because we are working within a very dynamic environment. So while the above exists, none of these can be successful unless attitudes change. So attitudinal changes, biases, and prejudices need to give effect to policies. The change has to be natural as possible. It has to be organically absorbed. Otherwise, it's simply paying lip service to what we need to do. So as I said before, institutional culture and context become very important factors in how we embrace change. The status quo on the topic of diversity in the South African university landscape. So USAF, which I explained earlier, has a transformation strategy group. So as you can see, one needs to put in place whether it's policies, whether it's laws, whether it's think tanks, strategic advisory groups, etc., to drive various areas of transformation within the country. So USAF has a transformation strategy group which advises the board on how to accelerate and deepen transformation within the higher education sector, and also to develop short, medium, and long-term strategies to address transformation matters. The group also advises the board on emerging good practices and on practices with a potential to undermine the transformation in the sector. So one looks at good practices not only within the country, but internationally as well. And the transformation does remain a key education policy goal, as it is understood that through education, change can be realized. And the transformation agenda underpins the white paper for post-school education and training. And so what this envisions, when we talk about a single coordinated system, this is very important given the past of South Africa, where we've come from, where the education system was divided along racial lines. And so the main vision here was to have a single coordinated system, and how we are able to manage that in a context that is so unequal remains a challenge for the country. So what are some of the interventions or measures to address diversity at universities? So in terms of race, yes, you have policies, guidelines, which address the intake of students, legislation to address employment gaps, etc. In terms of gender diversity, one looks like at the whole LGBTQIA, and transformation offices have been set up, or offices at university that have a role of ensuring that this is being managed. Some universities have gender equity units as well. We have disability units that ensure that the disability rights are being also addressed. And then training programs to create awareness and develop respect sensitivities on inclusion, equity, and mutual respect on cultural, gender, age, and racial diversities. So assessing the topic of diversity overall in the context, some of our bigger challenges are funding in higher education, and I think that's a global challenge. Access to higher education, where we do believe that higher education does equate to transformation. Unemployment, which has increased since COVID-19, and the gender diversity debates, which is ongoing. Gender management continues to present challenges, and generally policies, legislation tend to offer band-aid solutions while the inherent causes of the lack of progress are not addressed. So typically attitudinal changes are difficult to achieve. These are very personal and dependent on one's values, upbringing, home environment, cultural, religious influences, etc. The status quo at the University of the Western Cape. The university is relatively young, just over 60 years old. It's a historically disadvantaged university that was established for working class students. It has been the home for many political activists. It enjoys the description of being the university of the left. Transformation, access remain core to its ethos and vision. It boasts a gender equity unit, and transformation at our university is everyone's business. It does not reside just in one office. We have a very diverse student body as well as workforce, and our low fee structures increases access to higher education for low socioeconomic families. And these are just a list of some of the policies that we have at the institution that ensures that we keep focused on the changes that need to occur at the university. And these are just some of the partnerships that we currently have with Germany. There are others as well. This is just a list of a few. And then I have also presented at the end a QR code that will give you all of the information of the university once you have scanned that. Thank you very much. I tried to keep it within the time. Thank you very much, Jan Walter.